The wrench slipped from Walter Gray's oil-stained fingers as thunder rolled across the scrapyard. He cursed under his breath and wiped his hands on his coveralls. 67 years old and his grip was still getting worse. The storm had been building all day over the salvage moon, and now fat raindrops began pelting the twisted metal around him. Walter had been fixing broken things for 40 years. Ships, engines, weapons, sometimes people. Nothing surprised him anymore. At least that's what he thought until he heard the whimpering coming from inside the crashed fighter. The sound was soft, almost like a hurt animal. Walter grabbed his flashlight and crawled through the torn hull. The cockpit was destroyed, but the cargo hold was intact. His light swept across empty crates until it found something that made him freeze. A small dragon lay curled in the corner, barely alive. Walter had seen dragons before. Everyone had. They were the stuff of legends across the galaxy. Massive creatures that could melt steel with their breath and tear apart battleships with their claws. This one was different. It was tiny, maybe the size of a house cat, and completely white. Not silver or pale gray like some dragons, but pure white like fresh snow. The little creature lifted its head when the light hit it. Its eyes were pink, not the usual gold or red of dragons. Walter realized what he was looking at. An albino. He had never heard of such a thing among dragons. "Hey there, little one," Walter whispered. He moved slowly, keeping his voice gentle. The dragon tried to crawl away but was too weak. Its ribs showed through translucent skin and its wings were torn. Walter reached out carefully. The dragon didn't have the strength to resist as he lifted it. The creature was cold. That struck him as wrong. Dragons were supposed to be warm, filled with inner fire. This one felt like ice. He carried the dragon back to his workshop, a converted cargo container that served as both home and workplace. Walter had lived alone for 5 years now, ever since his wife died. The quiet had become normal, but somehow the dragon's soft breathing made the space feel less empty. Walter set the creature on his workbench and examined it under his good lamp. The dragon was definitely sick. Its breathing was shallow, and when it tried to lift its head, Walter could see exhaustion in those strange pink eyes. But what worried him most was the cold. He had never touched a dragon before, but everyone knew they ran hot. This one was barely warm enough to be alive. "What happened to you?" he murmured. Walter had some medical supplies left over from his military days. He cleaned the dragon's wounds and wrapped its torn wing. The creature didn't fight him. It seemed to understand he was trying to help. The hardest part was feeding it. Walter tried water first, dripping it slowly into the dragon's mouth with an eyedropper. The creature swallowed weakly. Then he tried some protein paste from his emergency supplies. The dragon managed a few small bites. Over the next 3 days, Walter barely slept. He stayed close to the dragon, monitoring its breathing and temperature. Slowly, the creature began to recover. Its eyes became brighter and it started moving around the workshop. That's when Walter noticed something else strange. The dragon never breathed fire. Not even a spark. Walter had expected at least some small flames as it got stronger, but nothing happened. He began to wonder if the cold he felt wasn't sickness, but something else entirely. On the 4th day, the dragon tried to fly. Its wings had healed enough to spread, but it could only manage short hops around the workshop. Walter watched it explore, knocking over tools and getting tangled in wires. Despite everything, he found himself smiling. The little creature had personality. "You need a name," Walter said as the dragon investigated his coffee mug. "How about Ash? You're white as ash and you don't seem to have any fire in you." The dragon looked up at the sound of its new name. Walter could swear it understood him. As Ash grew stronger, Walter began to understand the problem. The dragon wasn't sick. It was missing something fundamental. All dragons had an internal organ called a fire heart that produced the flames they breathed. Ash either didn't have one or it didn't work. Walter had spent his whole career fixing broken things. This seemed like just another problem to solve. He started small. Walter rigged up a heating pad that Ash could wear under its belly to keep warm. The dragon seemed grateful for the warmth and would curl up on it for hours. Next, he built a simple breathing apparatus that could heat air as Ash inhaled. It wasn't fire, but it was something. Weeks passed. Ash grew larger and stronger, now about the size of a medium dog. The dragon had claimed the workshop as its territory, making nests in odd places and following Walter around as he worked. They had developed a routine. Ash would watch Walter fix things during the day, then curl up next to his bed at night. Walter began to research dragons in his spare time. His computer had access to the Galactic Data Network, though the connection was slow this far out. What he learned surprised him. Dragons weren't just animals. They were intelligent, some as smart as humans. They had their own language, their own culture, their own technology, but they were also dying out. Various alien species had been hunting them for centuries, using their organs for weapons and their scales for armor. The few dragons left alive were either in hiding or enslaved. Walter looked at Ash, who was currently trying to untangle itself from a power cable. This wasn't just a pet he had rescued. This was a person. "I'm sorry, Ash," Walter said. "I didn't know." The dragon looked up at him with those strange pink eyes. Then it did something that shocked Walter. It spoke. The sound wasn't words, but Walter understood it anyway. Somehow the dragon was communicating directly with his mind. "Thank you for fixing me," Ash said without speaking. Walter sat down hard on his stool. "You can talk?" "Dragons have always been able to speak to those who care for us," Ash replied in that strange mental voice. But few species listen anymore. Walter realized that everything had changed. This wasn't about fixing a broken animal. This was about protecting someone who had been thrown away by the galaxy because they were different. He looked at Ash, who was watching him with intelligent, trusting eyes. "I didn't buy you, Pinocchio," Walter said quietly, remembering an old story from Earth. "I guarded you." Ash tilted its head. Curious about the reference, Walter smiled. "It means I'll keep protecting you until you don't need protecting anymore." Outside, the storm finally passed and stars began to show through the clouds. Walter didn't know it yet, but their real journey was just beginning. Ash was trying to eat Walter's welding torch when the ship landed. Walter dropped his wrench and grabbed the dragon before it could burn its tongue on the hot metal. 3 months had passed since he found Ash, and the dragon had grown to the size of a large dog. More importantly, Ash had become his friend and constant companion. "Rose is early," Walter muttered, watching the battered cargo ship settle onto the landing pad outside his workshop. Captain Rose Martinez had been bringing him supplies and news from the outside galaxy for years. She was one of the few people Walter trusted completely. "Who is Rose?" Ash asked in that mental voice only Walter could hear. "An old friend, someone who saved my life once." Walter looked at Ash seriously. "We need to hide you. I don't think Rose would hurt you, but other people might not understand." Ash nodded and scurried behind a stack of spare parts. The dragon had learned to be careful around strangers. Walter had told him stories about what happened to dragons who were discovered by the wrong people. Rose climbed down from her ship, her gray hair tied back and her captain's jacket covered in oil stains. She had been a military pilot like Walter, but she chose to keep flying after the war ended. Now she ran supplies between frontier worlds. "Walt, you look terrible," Rose said with a grin. "Are you eating anything besides coffee and protein bars?" "Good to see you too, Rose." Walter hugged his old friend. "What brings you here 3 weeks early?" Rose's expression grew serious. "Bad news from the inner systems. Biotech Industries is making moves again. They've been buying up salvage rights across this sector." Walter felt his stomach drop. Biotech was one of the largest corporations in the galaxy, known for biological research and weapons development. They had no business in a scrapyard sector unless they were looking for something specific. "What kind of moves?" Walter asked. "The kind that involve armed survey teams and genetic scanners." Rose pulled out a data pad. "They're looking for something, Walt, something biological. Word is they're offering huge bounties for any exotic specimens." Walter tried to keep his face neutral, but Rose had known him too long. She noticed his tension immediately. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked. Before Walter could answer, a loud crash came from inside the workshop. Rose raised an eyebrow. "Did you get a cat?" "Something like that," Walter sighed. There was no point hiding Ash from Rose anymore. If biotech was coming, he would need help. "Rose, I need you to promise me something. Whatever you see in there, you won't report it to anyone." Rose studied his face for a long moment. "You know I wouldn't betray you, Walt. What's going on?" Walter led her into the workshop. Ash had knocked over a toolbox while trying to hide and was now tangled in electrical cables. The dragon looked up at them with embarrassment clear in its pink eyes. Rose stopped dead. "Is that a dragon?" "His name is Ash," Walter said. "I found him dying in a crashed ship 3 months ago." Rose stared at Ash for a long time. The dragon had gone completely still, waiting to see how this new human would react. Finally, Rose knelt down and extended her hand slowly. "Hello, Ash," she said softly. Ash looked at Walter, who nodded encouragingly. The dragon approached cautiously and sniffed Rose's hand. After a moment, Ash rubbed against her palm like a cat. "He's beautiful," Rose whispered. "But Walt, do you have any idea how dangerous this is? If anyone finds out you have a dragon, I know the risks." Walter helped untangle Ash from the cables. "But I couldn't let him die." Rose stood up, her expression troubled. "There's something else you need to know. Biotech isn't just looking for any biological specimens. They're specifically hunting dragons." Walter felt Ash tense beside him. The dragon's mental voice was tight with fear when he spoke. "They want to cut me apart." "No one's cutting anyone apart," Walter said firmly. He looked at Rose. "How much time do we have?" "Maybe a week before their survey teams reach this sector." Rose was already thinking like the military officer she used to be. "We need to get Ash somewhere safe." "Where?" Walter asked. "Dragons are illegal to own on most worlds, and the ones that allow it treat them as property." Rose was quiet for a moment. "There might be another option. I've heard rumors about a group that helps dragons escape from bad situations. They call themselves the Dragon Guard. I've never heard of them. Most people haven't. They're very secretive, but if they exist, they might be able to help Ash." Ash had been listening to their conversation with growing anxiety. "What if they try to separate us?" he asked Walter. "What if they don't understand that we belong together?" Walter knelt down and placed a gentle hand on Ash's head. "We'll figure it out together. I'm not abandoning you." Rose watched the interaction with interest. "He talks to you, doesn't he?" Walter nodded. "Dragons can communicate telepathically with people they trust. What's he saying now?" Walter smiled slightly. "He's worried about being separated from me. He thinks of us as family." Rose's expression softened. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen." She turned to Ash. "Can you understand me when I talk normally?" Ash nodded. "Good. Because we're going to need to work together to keep you safe." Rose looked back at Walter. "I can contact some people, see if the Dragon Guard rumors are true. But we can't wait around for them to find us. What do you suggest? We leave tonight. I've got room on my ship for both of you." Rose gestured toward her cargo vessel. "We'll head for the outer rim, stay ahead of biotech while we figure out our next move." Walter looked around his workshop. It had been his home for 5 years, but it was just a place. Ash was what mattered now. "What about my equipment?" "Take what you can carry. Leave the rest." Rose was already planning their departure. "The important thing is getting Ash away from here before those corporate vultures arrive." Ash moved closer to Walter, pressing against his leg for comfort. "Are you sure about this?" the dragon asked silently. Walter looked down at his friend. 3 months ago, he had been a lonely old mechanic slowly drinking himself to death. Now he had purpose again. He had someone who needed him. "I'm sure," Walter said out loud so both Rose and Ash could hear. "We're family now." "Family sticks together?" Rose smiled. "Then let's get moving. I know a place where we can lay low while we contact the Dragon Guard." As they began gathering Walter's essential tools and supplies, Ash stayed close to his side. The dragon was scared, but he trusted Walter completely. That trust was both humbling and terrifying. Walter had spent his whole life fixing broken machines. Now he was trying to fix a broken system that treated intelligent beings like property. It was a much bigger job than anything he had tackled before. But looking at Ash, who was carefully helping pack delicate instruments with his small claws, Walter felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope they would find the Dragon Guard, they would keep Ash safe, and maybe, just maybe, they would find other dragons who needed help too. The galaxy was about to learn that some old mechanics didn't know when to quit. The underground base smelled like machine oil and hope. Walter followed Rose down a narrow tunnel carved into the asteroid's rock face. Ash rode on his shoulder, having learned to balance there during their week-long journey through hyperspace. The dragon's claws were gentle but secure, and his warm weight had become a comfort Walter didn't want to lose. "You sure these people are trustworthy?" Walter asked as they approached a heavy metal door. "As sure as I can be," Rose replied. "But we don't have many other options." The door opened before they could knock. A young woman with short black hair and calloused hands greeted them. She wore the kind of practical clothes that marked her as an engineer or mechanic. "Captain Martinez," the woman said. "We've been expecting you." Her eyes moved to Walter and Ash. "You must be the mechanic with the special friend." Walter tensed, but Ash sent him a calming thought. "She feels safe," the dragon said silently. "I'm Beth," the woman continued. "Welcome to Haven Station. We have a lot to show you." She led them through corridors lined with workshops and living spaces. Walter saw people of various species working on complex machinery, but what caught his attention were the dragons. A blue dragon the size of a horse was helping a human engineer adjust some kind of focusing lens. A smaller red dragon was carefully welding metal joints with precise flames. In one workshop, Walter saw a dragon that looked like it was made of living crystal, working alongside a team of humans to build some kind of energy device. "There are so many," Walter whispered. 43 dragons live here permanently," Beth said. "Another 62 use Haven as a stopping point on their way to safer worlds. We're not the only station like this either." Ash was staring at the other dragons with wonder. "I've never seen others like me before," he told Walter. "Actually," Beth said, "there are several dragons here who might be very interested to meet Ash." She had obviously heard the dragon's mental communication. "We have 3 others who were born without fire hearts." Walter stopped walking. "3 others? Dragons are evolving," Beth explained. "The ones without fire hearts aren't defective. They're different. They're smarter, more adaptable, and they work better with technology than traditional dragons." She smiled at Ash. "We call them tech dragons." They entered a large workshop where an elderly man was working on what looked like a dragon-sized suit of armor. The man had white hair and moved with the careful precision of someone who had spent decades working with his hands. "Carl," Beth called, "I'd like you to meet Walter and Ash." Carl looked up from his work and grinned. Another mechanic. And a young tech dragon. He wiped his hands on a rag and approached them. "I'm Carl Peterson, former Starship engineer, current Dragonsmith." "Dragonsmith?" Walter asked. "It's what we call ourselves. Humans who specialize in building technology to enhance dragon abilities." Carl gestured to the armor he was working on. "This is for a dragon who lost her right wing in a corporate raid. The suit will give her full flight capability and some defensive features." Ash was studying the armor with intense curiosity. "It's beautiful," he said aloud, his mental voice carrying to everyone present. Carl's eyes widened. "He can project his thoughts to multiple people at once? That's rare even among tech dragons. Is that unusual?" Walter asked. "Very. Most dragons can only communicate with one person at a time, and usually only someone they're bonded with." Carl knelt down to Ash's level. "Would you like to see what we've built for other tech dragons?" Ash nodded eagerly, and Carl led them to another section of the workshop. Here Walter saw devices he had never imagined. A breathing apparatus that could generate plasma flames, claw enhancers that could cut through steel, wing modifications that allowed for faster, more agile flight. "We don't replace dragon abilities," Carl explained. "We enhance them. A dragon with natural fire becomes more powerful. A dragon without fire gains the ability to create it." Walter picked up a device that looked like his own crude heating apparatus, but far more sophisticated. "How does it work?" "Fusion microreactor," Carl said. "Converts atmospheric elements into superheated plasma. A tech dragon wearing one can breathe flames hotter than most traditional dragons." "Could Ash use something like this?" "Better than that," Carl smiled. "We could build him a complete enhancement system. Not just fire, but improved strength, flight capability, even defensive systems." Ash was practically vibrating with excitement. "Could I really breathe fire?" "Better fire than most dragons have ever managed," Carl assured him. Beth led them to a common area where dragons and humans were eating together. Walter saw the easy interaction between the species and realized this was what partnership looked like. Not ownership, not worship, but genuine cooperation. "How long has this been going on?" Walter asked. "The Dragon Guard has existed for about 50 years, Beth replied. Started by a group of human engineers who were horrified by how other species treated dragons. We realized that humans have a unique gift for partnership rather than domination. But why humans specifically? An ancient voice answered from behind them. Because you fix things instead of breaking them. Walter turned to see a dragon unlike any he had encountered. This one was enormous, easily the size of a small building with scales that seemed to shift color in the light. Despite its size, it moved with surprising grace. "I am Elder Sage," the dragon said, its mental voice carrying the weight of centuries. "I am old enough to remember when dragons flew freely across the galaxy." Walter felt Ash tremble with awe. Meeting an elder was apparently a significant moment for any dragon. "You have done something remarkable, Walter Gray," Elder Sage continued. "You took a broken hatchling and made him whole without trying to change who he was." "I just gave him what he needed to survive," Walter said. "Exactly." The elder's eyes seemed to look right through him. Other species would have tried to force fire into him or discarded him as worthless. You accepted him as he was and found ways to help him become more. Elder Sage turned to Ash. "Young tech dragon, you have found a true guardian. Treasure this bond." Ash pressed closer to Walter. "I will." Over the next few days, Walter learned about the Dragon Guard's network. There were 12 hidden stations scattered across the galaxy, connected by a web of sympathetic traders and pilots like Rose. They rescued enslaved dragons, provided safe passage to sanctuary worlds, and most importantly, they were developing new technologies that enhanced dragon abilities. Walter found himself working alongside Carl and other dragonsmiths, contributing his own mechanical expertise to their projects. His experience with improvised solutions proved valuable when creating custom enhancements for individual dragons. Ash thrived in the environment. He learned from other tech dragons, practiced with various enhancement devices, and for the first time in his life, felt like he belonged somewhere. "We want to offer you both a permanent place here," Beth said during their second week at Haven. "Walter, your skills would be invaluable to our engineering efforts, and Ash, you could help us understand tech dragon psychology better." Walter was tempted. Haven felt more like home than his scrapyard ever had. But there was still the matter of biotech industries and their hunt for dragons. "What about the corporations?" he asked. "How long can you stay hidden?" Beth's expression darkened. "That's becoming a bigger problem. Biotech isn't the only one hunting dragons anymore. Several other corporations have started their own collection programs. Then hiding isn't enough," Walter said. "Sooner or later they'll find you. What are you suggesting?" Walter looked at Ash, who was helping a young dragon learn to use a flame generator. His friend had grown stronger and more confident, but more importantly, he had found his purpose. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding," Walter said. "Maybe it's time to show the galaxy what humans and dragons can accomplish together." Elder Sage, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "That would be dangerous. It could bring the full attention of every corporation and government that profits from dragon exploitation." "Yes," Walter agreed, "but it might also show other humans what's possible, and other dragons that they don't have to accept slavery." Ash moved to Walter's side. "Where you go, I go," the dragon said simply. Walter smiled at his friend. "Then I guess we're going to change the galaxy," Beth laughed. "You know, that might just be crazy enough to work." The Dragon Guard had been hiding for 50 years, protecting dragons one at a time. Maybe it was time to try a different approach. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy that dragons weren't property or gods, but partners. The warning came through Rose's communication system at 3 in the morning. "All Dragon Guard stations, this is Haven Command. Biotech fleet detected moving toward Ember's Rest. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. This is not a drill." Walter rolled out of his bunk and immediately looked for Ash. The dragon was already awake, his enhanced senses having picked up the tension in the air before the alert sounded. "What's happening?" Ash asked. "Biotech found one of the sanctuary worlds," Walter said grimly. "They're making their move." Haven Station erupted into controlled chaos. Dragons and humans worked together to prepare defenses, load evacuation ships, and organize rescue operations. Walter had never seen anything like the coordination between the species. It was like watching a perfectly tuned machine. Beth found Walter in the armory, where he was examining the station's defensive weapons. "We're sending a response fleet to Ember's Rest," she said. 12 ships with human dragon crews. We need someone to coordinate the engineering support." "I'm not a military commander," Walter protested. "No, but you understand dragons better than most of our people, and dragons trust you." Beth handed him a communication device. "Elder Sage specifically requested you lead the technical team." Walter looked at the device, then at Ash, who was wearing his new enhancement suit. The dragon looked like something out of a legend, with plasma generators built into his chest and wing modifications that made him twice as fast as a normal dragon. "This isn't what I signed up for," Walter muttered. "None of us signed up for war," Beth replied, "but sometimes war finds you anyway." 2 hours later, Walter found himself on Rose's ship. part of a fleet heading toward Ember's Rest. The sanctuary world was home to nearly 200 dragons and their human partners. If biotech captured it, they would have enough genetic material to clone dragons for centuries. Fleet Command. This is Rose. Technical team is ready for deployment, Rose announced over the communication system. Walter looked around the modified cargo hold. 12 dragons in full enhancement gear were secured for hyperspace travel, along with their human partners. Carl had insisted on coming along, bringing a portable dragonsmith workshop in case field repairs were needed. Ash was unusually quiet during the journey. Walter could feel his friend's anxiety through their mental link. "You don't have to do this," Walter said quietly. "You could stay on Haven Station where it's safe." "No," Ash replied firmly. "Those are my people on Ember's Rest, and you're my family. I go where you go." When they dropped out of hyperspace near Ember's Rest, the situation was worse than anyone had expected. 3 massive biotech battleships hung in orbit around the planet, launching shuttles full of corporate soldiers toward the surface. The Sanctuary's small defense fleet was already engaged, but they were badly outnumbered. "All Dragon Guard ships. This is Admiral Stone on the battleship profit margin," a cold voice announced over the communication channels. "You are interfering with a legitimate corporate salvage operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Elder Sage's voice responded from the sanctuary world. "Admiral Stone, you are attacking a peaceful colony. These dragons are free beings, not corporate property. Dragons are classified as exotic biological resources under galactic trade law," Stone replied. "Biotech Industries has legal rights to collect specimens for research purposes." Walter felt anger burning in his chest. The corporate executive was talking about intelligent beings like they were minerals to be mined. "Rose, get us close to the surface," Walter ordered. "We need to coordinate with the ground defenses." "Copy that. All ships follow Merchant's Dream toward the planet." "We're going in." The Dragon Guard fleet dove toward Ember's Rest, dodging fire from the biotech battleships. Walter watched through the viewports as corporate shuttles landed near the dragon settlements. This wasn't a battle, it was a kidnapping operation on a massive scale. "Walter," Carl said from his workstation, "I'm reading energy signatures from the planet. The dragons down there are using enhancement technology we've never seen before." Walter pulled up the sensor data on his screen. Carl was right. The power readings from the surface were off the charts. "Ash, can you contact the dragons on the planet?" Walter asked. Ash closed his eyes and extended his mental senses. "They're different. Stronger than the dragons at Haven, and they're angry." The reason became clear as they entered the planet's atmosphere. Elder Flame, the ancient matriarch of Ember's Rest, was leading the defense personally. But she wasn't just breathing fire. She was generating plasma beams that could slice through armored vehicles like paper. "How is she doing that?" Rose asked in amazement. Carl was studying his instruments frantically. "It looks like biomechanical integration. They've somehow merged Dragonsmith technology directly with their natural abilities." Walter realized they were seeing the next evolution of the human-dragon partnership. Not just external enhancements, but true fusion of biology and technology. "All ships, this is Walter Gray," he announced to the fleet. "We're not just here to rescue dragons anymore. We're here to learn from them." The Dragon Guard ships landed in a defensive formation around the main settlement. Walter and Ash disembarked with the technical team, immediately moving to coordinate with the planet's defenders. Elder Flame was even more impressive up close. Her scales seemed to incorporate metallic elements, and energy conduits ran along her wings like living circuits. When she spoke, her mental voice carried the power of centuries. "Walter Gray, the guardian who teaches dragons to transcend their limitations," she said. "Your timing is fortunate." "We came to help evacuate the colony," Walter replied. "There will be no evacuation. This ends here." Elder Flame's eyes blazed with inner fire. "We have been preparing for this confrontation for years." "Preparing how?" "By becoming more than we were." Elder Flame gestured toward the other dragons in the settlement. Walter saw that many of them showed similar biomechanical integration. "Your people taught us that enhancement and nature could coexist. We took that lesson further than you imagined." A massive explosion echoed across the settlement as biotech forces reached the outer defenses. Walter saw corporate soldiers in powered armor advancing through the forest. But they were being met by dragons unlike any he had ever seen. One dragon seemed to be made of living metal. its breath weapon firing concentrated energy beams instead of flames. Another had crystalline growths along its spine that generated powerful electromagnetic pulses. A third had developed natural armor plating that deflected energy weapons. "They've been experimenting with self-modification," Carl whispered in awe. "Not experimenting," Elder Flame corrected. "Evolving. Your species showed us that technology and biology are not opposites. They are partners in growth." Ash was staring at the enhanced dragons with wonder. "Could I become like them?" "If you choose," Elder Flame replied. "But first we must survive this battle." The next few hours were unlike anything Walter had experienced. Dragons and humans fought side by side, but it was more than cooperation. It was synthesis. Human tactical thinking merged with draconic power, creating combination attacks that the corporate forces couldn't counter. Walter found himself coordinating technical support for the entire defense. When dragons needed their enhancement systems repaired, his team was there. When humans needed to interface with draconic technology, he provided the translation. But the real turning point came when Ash made a decision that surprised everyone. "I want to try the biointegration," he told Walter during a brief lull in the fighting. "That's permanent. Ash, you can't undo it, I know. But I want to become more than I am. Not just for me, but for all the dragons who can't defend themselves." Walter looked at his friend, remembering the dying hatchling he had found months ago. Ash had grown into something magnificent, but he wasn't finished growing yet. "What do you need me to do?" Elder Flame overheard their conversation. "The integration requires a guardian's touch. A human who truly understands the dragon's soul must guide the process." Walter had fixed thousands of broken things in his life, but he had never tried to enhance something that was already perfect. The process took place in an underground chamber while the battle raged above. Walter's hands guided biomechanical components into harmony with Ash's natural systems, creating something entirely new. When Ash emerged, he was no longer just a tech dragon. He was a hybrid of biology and engineering, nature and artifice, tradition and innovation. His white scales now incorporated fiber optic elements that pulsed with inner light. His plasma breath system had merged with his respiratory system, making him capable of sustained energy attacks. But more importantly, he could now share his enhancement template with other dragons through direct contact. "I understand now," Ash said, his mental voice carrying new harmonics. "This isn't about individual power. It's about showing the galaxy what partnership can create." The corporate forces retreated when they realized they were no longer fighting traditional dragons. Admiral Stone's final transmission was full of frustrated rage. "This isn't over. Dragon Guard. Biotech will return with more ships, more soldiers." Elder Flame's response carried across all communication channels, ensuring that every corporate ship in the system heard it clearly. "Let them come. We are no longer prey hiding in the shadows. We are dragons and humans united, and we will defend our freedom with everything we have become." As Walter watched the biotech fleet withdraw, he realized that everything had changed. The age of hiding was over. Now came the age of standing together. The ancient chamber had been sealed for 3,000 years. Walter ran his hands along the smooth stone walls, feeling the subtle vibrations that indicated hidden technology. He and Ash stood before a massive door covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. Elder Flame had brought them here after the victory at Ember's Rest, claiming there were answers Walter needed to see. "What is this place?" Walter asked, his voice echoing in the vast underground space. "The last archive of the Flame Keepers," Elder Flame replied, her massive form barely fitting in the cavern. "The species that partnered with dragons before they vanished from the galaxy." Ash moved closer to the door, his enhanced senses studying the strange symbols. "I can feel something behind here. It's like voices calling from far away." Elder Flame breathed a controlled stream of plasma at specific points on the door. The symbols began to glow, and ancient mechanisms hummed to life. Slowly, the massive stone barrier rolled aside, revealing a chamber filled with floating crystals that cast rainbow light across the walls. "The Flame Keepers left this archive for whoever came after them," Elder Flame explained. "For 3 millennia, no one has been able to open it. Dragons lack the delicate touch required, and other species lack the understanding." Walter stepped into the chamber, feeling the weight of ages pressing down on him. The crystals responded to his presence, their light growing brighter and more focused, Suddenly, images began forming in the air around them. The holographic record showed a species that looked remarkably similar to humans, but with longer limbs and larger eyes. They worked alongside dragons that were different from the ones Walter knew. These ancient dragons were smaller, more agile, and their flames burned with colors that shouldn't exist. The Flamekeepers were engineers like you, Elder Flame said softly. But they were more than that. They were partners in the truest sense. Walter watched the holographic dragons weaving through complex aerial maneuvers, while their Flamekeeper partners directed streams of multicolored fire from the ground. It wasn't control or domination. It was perfect synchronization. What happened to them? Ash asked. A new set of images answered his question. Walter saw great wars between star systems, weapons that could destroy planets, and finally, a desperate evacuation as the Flamekeepers fled their dying worlds. The last images showed them releasing their dragon partners, setting them free rather than asking them to share their exile. They chose extinction rather than enslavement for their partners, Elder Flame said with deep reverence. The dragons scattered across the galaxy, but we never forgot. We never stopped hoping that someday new Flamekeepers would emerge. Walter felt something click in his mind, like a puzzle piece falling into place. That's why humans and dragons work so well together. We're not just randomly compatible, we're filling the same ecological niche the Flamekeepers once occupied. More than that, Elder Flame said. The Flamekeepers left genetic markers in the galaxy's human populations before they died. Every human carries traces of their DNA. Ash was studying another set of crystals, these ones showing technical diagrams. Walter, look at this. It's the biointegration process, but much more advanced than what we developed. Walter joined his friend and gasped at what he saw. The holographic schematics showed Flamekeepers and dragons sharing not just technology but consciousness itself. Partners could communicate across vast distances, share memories, and even share each other's abilities temporarily. This is what we were moving toward, Walter realized. The biointegration at Ember's Rest was just the beginning. Indeed, Elder Flame confirmed. But there is more. The archive contains the location of the original dragon homeworld, Pyroth. It was sealed away after the Flamekeepers died, waiting for their return. A new crystal activated showing star charts and navigation data. Walter recognized some of the stellar formations, but others were completely unfamiliar. Pyroth exists in a pocket dimension, Elder Flame explained. The last Flamekeepers created it as a sanctuary, a place where dragons could preserve their original culture and wait for new partners to emerge. Ash's excitement was radiating through their mental link. There are dragons there who remember the old ways? Not just dragons, Elder Flame said. The archive suggests that some Flamekeepers may have survived by entering suspended animation on Pyroth. They've been waiting 3,000 years for someone capable of opening the sanctuary. Walter felt the magnitude of the discovery washing over him. This wasn't just about saving dragons from corporate exploitation anymore. This was about restoring a partnership that had once spanned the galaxy. How do we reach Pyroth? He asked. Elder Flame gestured toward a complex device that had emerged from the chamber floor. It looked like a navigation console designed for two very different types of hands. The dimensional gateway requires both a dragon and a Flamekeeper to operate, she said. But Walter, you must understand the risk. Opening Pyroth will alert every power in the galaxy to its location. The sanctuary's 3,000-year protection will be gone forever. Walter looked at Ash, seeing his own determination reflected in the dragon's enhanced features. If we don't open it, nothing changes. Dragons will keep being hunted. Humans will keep being limited to individual partnerships, and the corporations will eventually win through sheer numbers. And if we do open it, then we give the galaxy a chance to see what real partnership looks like. Walter moved to the console, studying its dual-species design. We show them that evolution doesn't stop with biology. Ash joined him at the console, their hands and claws working together to activate systems that had been dormant for millennia. The chamber filled with energy as the dimensional gateway began to charge. There's something else, Elder Flame said as the portal stabilized. The archive indicates that dragons were never meant to breathe fire at all. The flames were always a product of partnership with Flamekeepers. What you call tech dragons aren't evolutionary throwbacks. They're dragons returning to their original state. Walter paused in his work. You mean Ash represents what dragons were like before the Flamekeepers? Before the partnership, dragons were creatures of pure intellect and adaptability. The fire came from the bond with flamekeepers, channeled through biotechnological interfaces much more sophisticated than anything we've developed. Ash looked at his enhanced claws with new understanding. I'm not broken. I'm not even different. I'm just original. You're what dragons were meant to become once they found new partners, Elder Flame confirmed. The dimensional gateway reached full power, opening a window into another reality. Through the portal, Walter could see a world of crystalline spires and floating islands where dragons of every conceivable color soared through skies that seemed to contain their own aurora. Are you ready? Walter asked Ash. We've come this far together, Ash replied. Whatever's waiting on Pyroth, we face it as partners. They stepped through the gateway together, leaving behind the familiar galaxy for a world that existed outside normal space and time. Behind them, Elder Flame began the process of alerting the Dragon Guard networks. Soon, the entire galaxy would know that the ancient partnership between dragons and their flamekeepers had been restored. As they emerged on Pyroth, Walter saw dragons unlike any in the known galaxy. These creatures seemed to be made of living energy, their forms shifting between matter and light, and standing among them, preserved in crystalline chambers that were just beginning to open, were beings that looked exactly like humans. The first flamekeeper to emerge from suspended animation looked directly at Walter and Ash with eyes that held 3,000 years of patient waiting. Welcome home, young flamekeeper, she said in perfectly clear English. We have much to teach you and even more to learn from you. Walter realized that everything he thought he knew about dragons, humans, and their relationship was about to change forever. The real adventure was just beginning. 1 year later, Walter stood in his new workshop watching Ash teach a class of young dragons how to use flame-focusing crystals. The workshop was nothing like his old scrapyard. Built into one of Pyroth's floating islands, it combined the best of ancient flamekeeper technology with modern engineering principles. Crystalline walls provided perfect lighting, while gravity generators allowed dragons to work comfortably at any angle. Most importantly, it was designed for true partnership between species. Remember, Ash was telling his students, the crystal doesn't create the fire. It focuses your intent. The flame comes from the bond with your flamekeeper partner. Walter smiled as he watched 6 young dragons, all of them tech dragons like Ash had been, practice with their human partners. The sight would have been impossible a year ago. Now it was becoming commonplace across dozens of worlds. Master Walter, called a voice from the workshop entrance. The Council of Worlds representatives have arrived. Walter turned to see Sarah, one of the young flamekeepers who had awakened from the ancient preservation chambers. In the year since Pyroth had opened, 47 original flamekeepers had emerged from their 3,000-year sleep. Each brought knowledge that was revolutionizing the partnership between humans and dragons. Already? I thought we had another hour. The biotech situation has accelerated their timeline, Sarah explained. 3 more corporate fleets were detected heading toward Dragon Sanctuary worlds. The Council wants to formalize the protection agreements before more colonies are attacked. Walter nodded grimly. The revelation of Pyroth and the return of the Flamekeepers had sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Some species welcomed the development, seeing opportunities for trade and alliance. Others, particularly those who profited from dragon exploitation, viewed it as a threat to their power. Ash, Walter called. We need to go. Ash finished demonstrating a complex flame-weaving technique, then glided over to Walter's side. The dragon's bio-integrated enhancements had continued evolving over the past year, incorporating Pyroth's advanced technologies. His white scales now contained microscopic crystalline structures that could generate and manipulate energy fields. How many representatives? Ash asked as they walked toward the council chambers. 47 species, including humans from 12 different colonial governments, Sarah replied. And all the major dragon clans have sent elders. The council chambers were one of Pyroth's most impressive spaces. Built into the side of a mountain-sized crystal, the room could accommodate beings of vastly different sizes and environmental needs. Dragons perched on elevated platforms while smaller species used floating discussion pods. Walter took his place at the central table, still uncomfortable with his role as the first official Flamekeeper ambassador. Beside him, Ash settled onto a platform designed for dragon participants. Around them, the assembled representatives represented most of the known galaxy's civilizations. The Council of Worlds recognizes Ambassador Walter Gray and Dragon Elder Ash, announced the session moderator, a tall humanoid with crystalline skin. You have called this emergency session to address the corporate threat to dragon sanctuaries. Walter stood, his weathered hands steady despite the importance of the moment. Honored representatives, the situation has moved beyond corporate raids. Biotech Industries has formed an alliance with 3 other major corporations. They're planning a coordinated assault on all known dragon settlements. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. The reptilian representative from the Saurian Federation leaned forward in his pod. With respect, Ambassador Gray, dragons have been considered property under galactic trade law for over 1,000 years. What legal basis do we have to interfere with corporate salvage operations? Ash responded before Walter could speak, his mental voice projecting to all present. The legal basis that we are not property. We never were. We are intelligent beings with our own culture, our own technology, and our own right to exist freely. That may be true, replied the insectoid representative from the Hive Collective, but changing galactic law requires unanimous consent from all council species. The corporations have significant influence with several member governments. Walter had expected this objection. Then we're not asking you to change galactic law. We're asking you to recognize a new category of citizenship. He activated a holographic display showing the partnership agreements that had been developed over the past year. Flamekeepers and their dragon partners are proposing recognition as a new form of dual-species citizenship. Not human, not dragon, but something entirely new. The chamber erupted in discussion. This was unprecedented in galactic politics. No species had ever successfully argued for dual consciousness citizenship. Elder Flame, who had been silent until now, rose to her full impressive height. Honored representatives observe. She and her human partner, Dr. Lisa Chen, moved to the center of the chamber. Walter watched as they demonstrated the full extent of Flamekeeper Dragon partnership. Dr. Chen's consciousness merged temporarily with Elder Flame's, allowing the human to perceive the world through draconic senses, while the dragon gained access to human analytical thinking. Together, they solved a complex engineering problem in seconds that would have taken either species hours working alone. The demonstration was elegant, powerful, and undeniably showed that the partnership created something greater than the sum of its parts. This is what we offer the galaxy, Elder Flame said as she and Dr. Chen separated. Not human dominance over dragons, not dragon superiority over humans, but true synthesis. A new form of consciousness that transcends individual species limitations. The crystalline moderator spoke carefully. Are you suggesting that other species could form similar partnerships? We're suggesting that evolution doesn't stop with biology, Walter replied. We're offering to teach willing species how to form true partnerships, how to enhance each other's abilities rather than competing for dominance. The discussion that followed lasted for hours. Some representatives were intrigued by the possibilities. Others were skeptical about the stability of dual consciousness beings, and a few were openly hostile to anything that might disrupt existing power structures. Finally, the vote was called. The resolution was simple. Recognize Flamekeeper Dragon partnerships as a legitimate form of dual-species citizenship, with all the rights and protections that implied. The results were closer than Walter had hoped, but sufficient for passage. 31 species voted in favor, 12 opposed, and 4 abstained. The resolution passes, announced the moderator. Flamekeeper Dragon partnerships are hereby recognized as a protected form of dual-species citizenship under Galactic Council law. Walter felt Ash's joy through their mental link as the chamber erupted in applause. But he also knew this was just the beginning. Legal recognition was one thing. Changing centuries of entrenched exploitation would be much harder. After the session ended, Walter and Ash returned to their workshop. Several messages were waiting for them, including reports from Dragon Guard stations across the galaxy. The news was mixed. Some worlds were already reaching out to establish partnerships with local dragon populations. Others were cracking down even harder, trying to capture dragons before the new laws could be fully implemented. We've given them hope, Ash said, reading through the reports. But hope isn't enough if they can't defend themselves. Then we make sure they can defend themselves, Walter replied. He pulled up the manufacturing schedules for enhancement technology. Every Dragon Guard station gets the new biointegration systems. Every partnership gets access to Pyroth's knowledge archives. And if the corporations escalate? Walter looked out through the workshop's crystal walls at the impossible beauty of Pyroth's skies. Dragons and flamekeepers worked together in the distance, building something entirely new. Then we show them what a galaxy of true partnerships can accomplish. 6 months later, Walter received a priority message from Rose, who was now commanding a Dragon Guard exploration fleet. The message was brief but significant. "Walt, you need to see this. We found 12 new species that have been secretly protecting dragons on their worlds. They want to learn about partnerships. The galaxy is bigger than we thought, and it's ready for change." Walter smiled and showed the message to Ash, who was currently helping a young human girl learn to communicate with her dragon partner. "Remember when our biggest worry was hiding from corporate scouts?" Walter asked. "Now our biggest challenge is teaching the galaxy how to evolve," Ash replied. "I think I prefer this problem." Walter watched the girl and her dragon achieve their first successful mind link, their faces lighting up with wonder and joy. It was the same expression he had seen on his own face in a mirror when he first heard Ash speak. "I didn't buy you Pinocchio," Walter said quietly, remembering that first day in his scrapyard workshop. "I guarded you." Ash turned to look at his oldest friend and partner. "And now we guard each other. All of us." Outside their workshop, the impossible city of Pyroth continued to grow, built by the partnership of species that had once been separated by fear and misunderstanding. The galaxy was learning what Walter had discovered in a broken dragon hatchling, that fixing something doesn't mean changing what it is. Sometimes it means helping it become what it was always meant to be. The age of true partnership had begun, and Walter Gray, an old mechanic who had just wanted to fix one broken thing, found himself helping to repair an entire galaxy.